Hello, this video is from the Wayne State Writing Center, and this video will cover a workshop that explores conducting scientific research. To begin conducting scientific research, students often, or researchers often, will need to determine a particular topic of interest and then begin to investigate literature and research in order to see what common arguments or what common research threads are being produced in relationship to that topic. That then allows you to develop your own research question. It's not advisable to start out saying, I'm going to have this research question or this research problem, and then begin exploring until you have a clear sense as to what research has already been produced surrounding that topic and what the current research questions are out there. When you start looking at the research that's been produced, they are usually categorized in a variety of different ways. Some will conduct research in an attempt to define something. This is often when something is new to the field or when people in the field have found a reason to redefine a particular topic. Classification is another avenue for research. Process. This is often something that you can see done in, say, secondary education or teaching research, but certainly also in other categories in which something new needs to be placed into a particular category. Process is often, again, used both in humanities and in STEM research. Argument is typically a more humanities philosophy history kind of approach. Cause and effect, both of those can be housed both in humanities and in STEM, and then comparison, looking at two different topics or looking at two different approaches in order to determine either which is better or if they should be combined or whatever that might be. To begin research, students at Wayne State University as well as faculty have resources available to them. The first is that Wayne State University has librarians that specialize in particular subjects and create guides for those subjects. So it's a dedicated resource and they will be able to help you find research, narrow down or expand your research, as well as give you tips for database systems, journals, and even search terms or approaches that would be most useful for you. In order to access the Wayne State University research guides, you can either go to the Wayne State Library website, but then you can also go to this link, which then will go by subject, or you can search. And so as you can see, there's quite a few different subject guides that you can look for. If you were interested in, say, education, you would see that you have a variety of different disciplines or guides that you can look at. And here you'll see the librarian that's linked to that particular subject, topic, or guide. Typically, they always have an email me function, and they're very good at getting back, as well as scheduling appointments, which can either be online or in person. And then as you can see, they'll give you kind of access or support regarding different databases that are quite typical for use in the field, as well as a bunch of other types of resources that are useful for you in your field of study. And so that would be a very good area for you to go to if you, are beginning your research and looking at the topic and what is out there. But sometimes you might be given a topic that you're not familiar with and are asked to research that. And so often students will go to, say, Wikipedia or Google, giving you a variety of different kind of results, and that may or may not be actually like relevant or truthful. And so it's one resource that I like to have students go to when they're beginning a research topic, and especially if they don't have a lot of knowledge on that, is to go to the Wayne State University Scales virtual reference library. And so in that reference library, it's essentially set up to be a online encyclopedia that also links to other sources and to other texts. And so it's very useful when you're just starting out. As you can see, they have collections for a variety of different categories or topics of interest, but you could also go and look at something like, um, say you're interested, you were told you need to look at genetic testing. And so it'll bring up quite a few different resources for you, right? Some are books, some are articles, depending on what that might be. And then if you click on a resource, it'll open it up for you. And what's nice about this one as well is that it will also typically give you other types of resources to link to as well. So they might like say, here's some other subject matters, or here's some other genres or texts that are similar to the search that you just looked at. Of course, then after you've done that, after you've started to look and see what's the history of this topic, the progression of the exploration of this topic throughout time, what is currently being researched and talked about this topic, then you can go into the databases and journals and even academic websites that are appropriate for your field of study or for that topic of study. But it's really good to start out with having a basic knowledge as to what your topic is about, what has been said about it, what's being said about it now, so that when you do go in and do this research in a much more academic, peer-reviewed kind of area, you have a little bit of foreground knowledge that helps you interpret those texts that you're reading. It depends on what type of research you're doing, but often research requires that you gather a fair amount of sources in order to be able to create a framework of what that topic is, what research has been done on it, and the circulating questions, concerns, or gaps of research that exists regarding that topic. And so that means you might have quite a few sources that you have to collect and keep track of. So you can do things to help organize your sources. You can set a browser kind of folder so that when you download any journals, you can have them download directly to your folder. And there's a video that's right here that kind of walks you step by step how to do that. You can use things like Dropbox, Google Drive that are cloud-based so that you can access them at any location that you're at. Of course, your USB, or old school. Some people like to be old school and print things out and put them with binders and tabs. But then there's also some online tracking of sources systems that you can use. One is Evernote. Evernote's nice, especially for people who are visual. It's a free, it is cloud-based, and so it allows you then to track your sources, place them into different folders, and even folders that have images, or you can have images for the actual article that you've found or whatever to remind you of the importance of it or what it might be. You can highlight it, annotate it, all these kinds of things. You can also use Zotero, which is free through the Wayne State University Library. It's very user-friendly. It's not cloud-based, so what will happen is it'll create a little icon on the top of your screen, and every time you're in the Wayne State Library database system, you can click on Zotero and it will save it to a folder that you created for that research topic or whatever it may be. But it's good to start a reference page early, and it's good to keep track of your sources. The last thing you want to do is find that you can't find the source that was like the perfect source that you found, or to not have all the information listed and therefore not be able to reference it in text and in your reference page. One thing that I also suggest to students when it comes to conducting research is to start creating research notes. And it's not necessarily a fun process, but it's a very useful process. and very helpful in helping you to connect your research, the research that you found, together. So say you have to find 10 sources. How is it that these 10 sources are all talking about a similar topic with similar questions, with similar concerns? How do you combine those all together in order to write a research paper? And so this, rather than just highlighting text, and then you go back and you're like, I'm not sure why I highlighted that or what I was thinking or where I thought I would use it or how it connects to anything other than just what I was reading and thought it was interesting. Cornell notes are really useful because they help you or kind of encourage you to make those notes and make those connections as you're researching. So Cornell notes ask that you divide your paper into 2 columns where you have a left side and a right side. And so on the right side, you summarize and paraphrase the material that you found. And the reason that you do that is so that you can begin to connect other articles and arguments and topics and ideas together. Research is very much based on utilizing more than one source to make a claim or to present information and argument. And so if you summarize and paraphrase what you found in that text, and then you go to another text and they're defining, say, genetic testing the same way, you can use those two together in order to say, here's the definition of genetic testing based on these two sources. But if you only use quotes in your research, then you can only rely on one research text or argument, and therefore your research looks a little bit flat and it looks as if you're only relying on one source to make some pretty important claims. You also want to keep a note of the key ideas words. Those are going to help you to research this topic in more detail because you should be seeing common consistent ideas and words cropping up in the research that you're looking and finding. If you're not, then that might be a hint that you're a little bit too broad in your research and you haven't honed in on a very specific kind of narrow path of research. Make sure that you take notes of the questions that are being raised or presented in the research that you're finding. And then make sure that on the left of your Cornell annotations, that is where you're going to keep reasons for the information that you have collected. And what I mean by that is you might say, I pulled out and paraphrase this definition of genetic testing so that I can later on define it at the beginning of my research essay. Or I pulled out this statistical information because it's important and highlights the credibility of the argument being made about this research topic. So just remind yourself why it was that you found this particular piece of information so important, and even potentially where you might place it in your research essay or article, and if it is similar to anything else that you found. So often I like to place in each Cornell annotation that I do for each article, I'll number them. And so in my first Cornell annotation, say I found a clear definition of the topic and some key questions, and then I get to a research article number 4 that I'm reading, and they're saying almost identical things as research article 1. I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to say, this reminds me of my first article that I found, and they're defining this in the same way as my first article, and that way you can connect those together. The other important thing to do is to color code your notes for easy reference, and that means that you can start to color code key common questions or key common definitions or key common claims and things like that, so that when you look over your Cornell annotation, say you've got 10 sources, you can see visually which one of them, say if green is ethical considerations of genetic testing, and their particular argument is lack of regulation, right? And out of the 10 sources you have 6 that are all saying lack of regulation of genetic testing is the main issue regarding genetic testing. And if you've color-coded all of those in blue, you can group all of that together now and start to write around it. So that's really useful with color coding. I like color coding too because it kind of visually highlights things for me that I might have missed or might not have seen.